lecture guest with Dr. Richard Boggis. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Philippines and welcome to Central Luzon State University. And to all our visitors this afternoon, isang magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Well, once again, welcome to our Research Innovation Development Festival, a celebration of high impact of Central Luzon State University. We started last Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen, and we will end up tomorrow for the gala celebration. Well, the Ride Festival, for the information of everyone, is a celebration of Central Luzon State University's strong commitment to maintain its relevance and responsiveness to the needs of the challenging milieu. It is a testimony of our university's subscription mandate of generating high impact knowledge products and innovative technologies in agriculture and related fields. It is a mechanism, ladies and gentlemen, by which the university may sustain its vibrant culture of forging multilateral partnerships for stronger pursuits of knowledge generation, technology transfer, and commercialization. It is the university's humble way to paving tribute to the men and women who tirelessly lend their knowledge and skills to discover novel ways of solving today's global issues. Well, we are live at Facebook, ladies and gentlemen. This is a hybrid conference. This is a hybrid activity, meaning we are in person. We have here in-person guests and visitors, and we also have participants coming from our online platform. All right. Before we formally start our program, once again, a big warm round of applause to set our energy this afternoon. It's really hot in here. Well, to start our program, I'd like to request the presence of our beloved university president for the welcome remarks. Once again, may I call in Dr. Edgar Ayorden. Sir, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hale. Good afternoon. Parang humina lalo. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, that is better. To Dr. Richard J. Randle-Boggis, Research Associate, the University of Sheffield, UK, sir. To Mr. Ray Sermonia from Boston. Kanina po nagkatuntunan kami, magkamag-anak pala kami. Because they are related with General Sermonia of the Philippine National Police. And when I met General Sermonia, he told me that we are relatives. So relative ko na rin pala sila. And of course, to Mr. June Sermonia, who is also accompanying our guest speaker, to Miss Marnelli Subong and Miss Loribel Pidoy from the Research Program Development Division. Welcome, ma'am. And Miss Leia Banyares Calmada and Mr. Richard Bernardo from the Knowledge Management and Information System Division of DA Bar. Okay. To the CLSU officials, the 4 vice presidents, the deans, directors, faculty members, staff, students, and of course, I would like to recognize Professor Pujihara and Madam Pujihara. Guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome you all in this professorial chair lecture. So, first of all, I would like to thank DA Bar for arranging this professorial chair. And this is a very important part of our RIDE festival. To give you a background, this is the first time that we have harmonized the research agenda of the university. So we are now singing only one tune, both from the academic and the research and extension program of the university. So the whole festival is dedicated to highlight and emphasize on the different researches, developmental projects, generated technologies, specialized centers, and of course, to showcase the university's newest feature, the Kamalig. And I think we have to create a new college, the College of Tourism. What do you think? Because there are a lot of people now asking where is that Kamalig. And just this morning, we had we witnessed the pitching of 11 or 12, sorry, 13 products developed by our researchers and scientists. And this afternoon, we are graced with an expert from the United Kingdom to shed a light and share to us on the sustainable goals, which is where our university leads as well. In advance, I would like to thank Dr. Randle-Boggis for giving us additional perspective, for being generous in sharing with us, sir, your expertise. I do hope that would be an even greater partnership for years to come, and we would like a more engaging partnership. With that, let us all savor in all these wonderful points, ventures, and also all together, let us keep on celebrating high impact CLSU. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you very much once again to Dr. Edgar Aorden, our university president, for the warm welcome remarks. It is indeed, this is one of the major events, highlight events of our Ride Festival 2022. And we believe that this won't be the first and the last. Of course, there will be more activities for us here in Central Luzon State University. Once again, we are live here at the Academic Amphitheater here at Central Luzon State University. We'd also like to acknowledge the participants of and our visitors online in the Zoom platform. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Without further much ado, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to call in the Vice President for Research and Extension, Dr. Armando Espino Jr., for the introduction of our speaker. Sir, please.
Good afternoon. Dr. Richard Randle-Boggis' vision is to solve global socio-environmental problems at the intersection between natural sciences and sustainable development. His career objective is to lead a multidisciplinary research group mitigating environmental damage and enhancing livelihoods through innovative environmental and infrastructure research. Dr. Boggis has a PhD in biology from the University of York, where he evaluated DNA sequence analysis methods and researched the impacts of increased flooding events on microbial ecosystems and greenhouse gas emissions. He has a Master of Science in Clean Technology with distinction from the Newcastle University and a Bachelor of Science in Biology also at the Newcastle University. He is currently a research associate on food and energy security from the University of Sheffield. He was also a research associate on microbial ecology from the University of Glasgow. He was a senior research associate on solar parks and ecosystem services from the Lancaster University, among others. His research interests span several disciplines required to create holistic solutions that tackle complex global challenges. Dr. Boggis' main focus is on agrivoltaics in East Africa, hybrid food energy systems that address the food energy water nexus while also offering livelihood benefits to rural agricultural communities. His multidisciplinary background includes biology, renewable energy, sustainable infrastructure, environmental science, microbial ecology, and industrial environmental management. His broad research background also includes creating a decision support tool for renewable energy developers to assess the impacts of solar park management on ecosystem services. He characterized microbial ecosystems in innovative decentralized sanitation systems in Southeast Asia that are solar heated to reduce waste and the spread of diseases. He has numerous scientific publications, and he's also currently a committee member of Agrivoltaics International Scientific Committee, contributing to the strategic direction of the International Agrivoltaics Conference Series. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest lecturer, Dr. Richard Randle-Boggis.
Good afternoon, everybody. Magadang Hapon, and thank you very much for attending this talk. I hope I pronounced that well. Before I begin, I would also just like to say a warm thank you to Dr. Ordung and Dr. Espino for hosting and inviting me here, and also to Ray and Jun for making this happen, and of course the DA Bar as well for facilitating this event. I'd also just like to say a big thank you to the energetic reception of this event from the moderator. I think if you fancy coming to the UK sometime, we could use you at our events as well. So thank you. Salamat. That's all I've got, I'm afraid, for the Filipino. So I'm going to be talking about agrivoltaics, which is a new application of solar panels, essentially integrated into agricultural systems. And actually, Dr. Auden used a very interesting word in his welcome speech, which was harmonizing. And this is all about renewable energy initiatives in harmony with existing land uses. So the more that we develop sustainable development initiatives, the more we start to cross conflicts within those initiatives. So, for example, developing solar panels produces low carbon electricity, right? And that addresses Sustainable Development Goal 7 for clean energy. But if those solar parks are developed on agricultural land, you're actually then conflicting with food security. So we're now within the realm of sustainable development, saying how can, within that bubble, can we then create more sustainable initiatives with synergistic and harmonious benefits rather than trying to avoid conflicts between them. So this here is the system that we've developed in Kenya. This is an agrivoltaic system, agrivoltaic, agriculture and photovoltaics, with the system raised up above agricultural land. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So what you can see here is that we have a field of solar panels, but underneath we're still producing food as well. So we're no longer having a conflict between those two sustainable initiatives. And the really exciting thing about this technology, especially if implemented with the right design in the right context, is that it can address multiple development goals. So of course, we have solar panels producing low carbon electricity, and these can be off grid as well. There's not the requirement to be connected to a grid system. These could be microgrids, they could be mini grids, they can be off grid, as well as being large scale grid tie systems, which are connected to the national grid, providing much needed low carbon electricity to the grid. Of course, the food aspect, there's food produced underneath as well. So we have that sustainable land component, which I've already mentioned. But an exciting one, when we were first exploring this many years ago, we were thinking, okay, this is a win-win for food and energy security. But then we were thinking, hang on, we've got a big flat surface here where we can actually harness the rainwater that's running off the solar panels and store that rainwater in a storage tank to use later on during periods of drought as well. So rather than just having rain falling onto the crops and then some obviously falling onto the crops near the roots, but also falling onto the leaves and around other parts of the soil and then evaporating away, we can store that large surface area, store the water from that to use later for a period of drought. And then the 3 pillars of sustainability: environment, we've got the low carbon electricity and land sustainability, but there's also society and economy, which makes up the 3 pillars of sustainability. And there are socioeconomic benefits with this, because of course, there's the provision of electricity to communities that may not have access to energy traditionally. And of course, it's low carbon electricity as well, and more reliable than relying on diesel generation and the fluctuating diesel prices. But it also creates jobs as well. So it's a new technology. It requires, skilled workers to implement and install these technologies and to maintain them, while also still maintaining the traditional agricultural research on the land as well. So it's really addressing multiple goals rather than, say, just providing low carbon electricity, which of course is still very, very important. Next slide, please. Yeah. But of course, the systems have to work. They have to perform well. One of the first questions that I get asked about agrivoltaic systems is, well, you're shading the crop and plants need sunlight. So that shading, are you not going to be reducing the crop yields? Well, actually, the relationship between light intensity and photosynthesis or plant growth isn't linear. And I'm sure many people here will know that. So it's not a case of more light equals more growth. At some point, this growth curve starts to saturate. And in fact, if we will carry on with this graph, eventually excessive light and excessive UV can actually damage the crops and reduce the yield of crops. So the partial shading can actually create a favorable growing environment for certain crops. Now, of course, I'm talking about a lot of benefits here, but the system has to be designed and implemented with the right context, with the right crops, the right design of the system. And I'll come on to that in a moment. Next slide, please. So agrivoltaics has really started to take off over the past decade. And so here's some examples of some systems that have been tested, some research systems. So we've got very large systems in Germany for mechanized agriculture underneath. This is an excessively engineered system. This was a pilot study that they implemented a while ago by Fraunhofer ISE, and they have said they would now design the system slightly differently to this, but this was to test, can you grow certain crops, potatoes, wheat, underneath the solar panels? Down here, this is a photo from our system in Kenya, and you can see, look at these cabbages. Like we've got some good growth of cabbages underneath the solar panels, so we're showing that they work. And I'll come on to the data a bit later. Next slide, please. So there are many potential benefits, and the key word here is potential, because again, it has to be designed and implemented in the right way. So this is a slide that I put together when presenting the project for East Africa. So some of it will be applicable to the Philippines, some of it maybe not so much so. But as I've mentioned, of course, there's the electrification for off-grid communities with low emission electricity. And what this can mean for rural agricultural communities is that you can then power post-harvest processing, which can add value to your crops. So for example, if you're producing fruit, you can then you power pulping machines to produce another product which adds value, which you can sell. If you're producing mangoes, you can power a water bath, which can be used to reduce pests of the mangoes. So it can add value to agricultural communities. And of course, the electricity can be used for wider benefits beyond the agriculture as well. So it can be used for powering schools, lighting, laptops, powering fridges to store medicines, clean cooking, etc. Again, we're thinking of the context of East Africa here, where a lot of the cooking relies on biomass and charcoal. So if we were powering e-cook stoves, that's reducing the particulate matter within the household. Again, the food aspect, there's the potential, again, the keyword potential, to improve crop yields. And interestingly, by creating this favorable growing environment, is it possible to actually then grow other crops that traditionally you wouldn't be able to grow in that region? Perhaps the solar radiation is too intense, and the UV damage is too intense for certain crops, or there's just not quite enough rainfall for certain crops. The partial shade from the panels reduces evapotranspiration. It reduces temperature stress, it reduces UV stress, thinking in the tropical regions. And so by reducing that evapotranspiration and improving the water use efficiency of the system, can you now start to grow crops in an area where before you couldn't grow them? I've already mentioned adding value to produce. And again, on that same note as the creative favorable growing environment, can you expand ranges of certain crops? So now where, say, there's a threshold where that crop can't be produced, are you expanding that range by reducing some of the limits to the crop production? Now, a really interesting one is climate change mitigation and resilience. A lot of people often think in the here and now. What's the context now? But we also have to think, what's the context going to be in the future? What are the future challenges that we're going to face? And so by reducing the evaporative water loss, then that could add, say, resilience to drought, which is going to become an increasing problem, at least in East Africa, where I'm working at the moment. So there's that potential to reduce the issues that we'll be facing in the future. I've already mentioned the mitigating drought impacts, and that's through that reduction in evapotranspiration. Again, this is all very exciting stuff to say. There are caveats to it, which I'll discuss later. And of course, we have got data to back this up. And at the start, I mentioned the rainwater harvesting. So it's no longer just a win-win for food and energy. It's a triple win for food, energy, and water. Of course, there's the dual land use and avoiding land use conflicts. That's an interesting challenge because agrivoltaics, by its very nature, is bringing together two different sectors, the agriculture sector and the energy sector, which have different business models and different objectives. So that's quite a challenge. And in fact, and I was saying this to Ray earlier, one of the things that I always remember is I was presenting this idea a few years ago to an energy developer in Kampala in Uganda. They'd been tasked by the president to roll out solar panels for electrification of rural communities which didn't have access to electricity. And he said to me, "Why are you talking to us about tomatoes?" And that's always stuck with me because there's many potential benefits of these systems, but a lot of people will be thinking on their objective. His objective was providing electricity to rural communities. So why was I there talking about how this can increase tomato yields? Thankfully, his boss was also in the room and he understood the potential, and we're now demonstrating these systems in East Africa. Another aspect is that to develop solar parks, it has to go somewhere. You could take land from agricultural use. Ideally, you would use degraded land, low quality land. Rooftops would be ideal, but that's not the only land that's used. And in some cases, good quality, healthy natural habitats are being cleared to develop solar parks. And so rather than doing that, if we place a solar park above agricultural land with the panels spaced apart to let enough sunlight through, then we're reducing that land degradation. And I just want to go back to that's the core part of agrivoltaics, is that the panels are raised up but spaced apart. So you still let some sunlight through. The density will depend on the crop that you're growing, the location that you're in, and I'll talk more about that a bit later. I've always mentioned business and employment opportunities. An interesting one is a diverse income stream. A farmer is no longer just relying on the agricultural produce, but there's the potential to sell electricity to the national grid if it's a grid tie system. So you can add an income for farmers. And that's what we're seeing a lot of in the UK, is farmers actually converting agricultural land to only solar panels, selling the high value electricity to the grid, but losing the agricultural land. And that's become an incredibly contentious issue in the UK at the moment, where we need to be developing more renewable energy to meet our net zero goals. Yet we're also saying that solar panel, well, I say we, the current government is looking to reduce solar panels on agricultural land. So we want to propose this idea as a way to mitigate that trade-off. Another benefit, and this one particularly could be applicable to the Philippines, is the shade for farm laborers. So if it's a manual labor crop, then the partial shade could be providing shading for the farm laborers as well. I've mentioned the reduction in household particulates, and also an interesting one is gender inclusion. This was specifically this applies to many places, but thinking about East Africa, the agriculture sector is a split roughly 50-50 between men and women. The energy sector is predominantly run by men. And so with an agrivoltaic system, you then create an opportunity for women to become more involved in in energy decision making. Next slide, please. So this slide here is just showing some of a comparison between conventional photovoltaics, just ground mounted, versus an agrivoltaic system. Both of them provide low carbon electricity. If we use the conventional system as a baseline, there will be a slight reduction in the generation from an agrivoltaic system because you have to space the panels apart. So in terms of the unit area of land, there's a slight reduction in your generation per unit area. But if land area isn't an issue, then you can still achieve the desired capacity. You would just need to build a larger system. And of course, with conventional PV, there's the potential loss of agricultural land, as I've already mentioned. Whereas with agrivoltaics, you actually have the production of food as well. Conventional PV requires panel cleaning, which uses water. Now, this is actually an area of conflict, particularly in places like India, where there's a high demand for water, and there's a huge opportunity for solar development in India. And so large solar initiatives have been rolled out, and those solar developers are using water to clean the panels, and the farmers need that water for irrigation. So there's now a conflict between the farmers and the energy developers for water. Whereas with the agrivoltaic system, you can harvest the rainwater and the panel cleaning water that's running off the solar panels and then use it for irrigation. So that water isn't just being used for cleaning solar panels, but it's actually still being used for the irrigation as well. I've already mentioned the land benefits. The socioeconomic aspects, I mean, this is an interesting one. They both create, there are economic benefits of both of them. What we're seeing in the UK is a lot of bad PR for conventional PV. There's a lot of communities that are against solar being developed in their area, and also there's a big issue with communities not being involved in the development process. It's very much an outside system. So could agrivoltaics be an opportunity where the community could be involved more in the decision making of the system as well? So you could almost flip the bad PR into good PR. And then also the aspect of creating new markets. So there could be areas of land where the community don't want the agricultural land to be lost. The farmers don't want the agricultural land to be lost. So conventional PV won't work there, but agrivoltaics could. So there is a new market there as well. And then a downside, of course, is the higher initial cost, because the systems are raised up. They require a greater mount structure. So that costs more money. It also means that there's more embedded carbon in the system because there's more steel involved. So it would take longer to pay off the embedded carbon into the system as well. So that's one of the main downsides, is the material cost of an agrivoltaic system. And also the maintenance is slightly more challenging. This can be overcome. This is an engineering issue that can be overcome, but there's it's slightly more complex when the panels are 3 meters up rather than just mounted 1 meter above the ground. Next slide, please. So there are many factors that affect the performance of an agrivoltaic system: how much solar radiation is available, what's the air temperature, which also affects crop production, the amount of precipitation, the crop type and the shade tolerance of the crop type. These systems won't work with every crop. So it has to be obviously lower level crops that are shade tolerant, and also the soil type. What's the demand for electricity, and also the connection? Is it going to be an off-grid system? Is it going to be a microgrid, mini-grid, or will it be a grid-type system? And then you have to think about the connection aspect as well. A lot of these are actually defined by the location of the system, but also if you're at higher latitude, your performance is going to vary greater between the winter and summer months or throughout the year. Is there a market for the crops that you're producing? It might be a case that agrivoltaics would work very well for a certain crop in an area, but if there isn't the market for that crop, then it's not going to work economically. And then a very interesting challenge is the policy and regulation aspect. We're in many ways in new territory here, in uncharted territory, of developing agrivoltaic systems. And so how will that work with land use policy, with planning policy, with energy regulations, conversion of agricultural land? I mean, we're avoiding that loss of agricultural land, but we need to understand what the policy and regulatory context for agrivoltaic systems, because that another aspect, particularly thinking in the UK, one issue that communities reject solar parks is the visual aspect. So by having the systems raised up, then there's even more of a greater visual impact there as well. Next slide, please. So there are many questions that need to be answered about agrivoltaics. Which technology? It's not just the ones that I've shown you so far. There's we can have tracking systems where the panels can tilt to track the sun, or they can be pointed towards the sun during the midday when the sun is really intense, but then during the morning and afternoon, they could pull away from the sun to let more sunlight through to the underlying crops. So there's different technologies of agrivoltaics. In Germany, they're even testing vertical bifacial panels, which are basically fences of solar panels on either side. So when the sun's in the sky in the middle of the day, then they're actually not generating much electricity. But in the morning and the evening or the afternoon, that's when they're generating more of their electricity. And those systems are lower down, they're less of a visual impact, and also reduced melting structure as well. So less embedded carbon in those systems as well. But of course, they're not optimized for electricity generation because the panels are vertical. How do we include the local community in the decision making? How do we design the systems? How spaced apart do the panels need to be for different crops and different locations? And of course, there's the economic aspect as well. So there are many different questions that need to be addressed before an agrivoltaics system is implemented in a new location. Next slide, please. So this is much of the research that's been going on so far. Primarily, it's been in Europe, in the US, and actually a significant amount in China and in Japan as well. So there is research that's been conducted in this area, and it's really started to take off over the last 5 years. So the concept was actually first introduced in the 1980s by Professor Goetzberger at the Fraunhofer Institute for Sustainable Energy in Germany. And then it went quiet for a few decades. And then a French team picked it up and it started to get researched again. And now it's taken off again in Europe, now in the US. And there's a lot of work, like I said, in East Asia. And now it's started to be developed in parts of Africa. We've got the project in East Africa, research in Chile. And there's a very small project in Malaysia. Next slide, please. So this is where some of the things that we had to think about for designing the system. So we have the rainwater harvesting. We've got two systems. One in Kenya is connected to the grid, so we reduce the energy bills. So that doesn't need batteries, but the system in Tanzania is off-grid. And so that needs battery storage so that you can provide a reliable supply of electricity. You have to think about, as I said, which crops to produce. And I've already mentioned the issues such as panel density and the height of the system. If it's going to be mechanized, then you'll need the system to be higher up. If you're in a location where there isn't so much sunlight or the crops need more sun, the panels need to be spaced further apart. And in fact, this is a bit of an interesting looking design of the system, but we designed it like this so that as this is in the southern hemisphere, so it's north facing, and the reason it's designed like this is so that as the sun moves across the sky, the bars of shade move across the crops. And in fact, one of the things that they found in the first study in France, they didn't design it like that. They designed it in conventional solar park way, where the panels are long, wide arrays. Then you have the gap, then you have the wide array. And what they found from that is that the crops underneath the gaps were receiving plenty of sunlight and growing well, but other crops underneath the panels, they were in the shade all day, whereas this system is designed to better distribute the light over the crops. And there are other things that you can now do, different technologies. You can put diffusers in the middle to help diffuse the light across the crops underneath. And in fact, we've got a new research project starting, a Horizon Europe project starting within a few months, which is looking at solar panels which actually split the wavelengths of light, and they use the red wavelengths and some of the blue wavelengths to pass through to the crops underneath, which is required for photosynthesis, and the rest of the wavelengths are used to generate electricity. So there's a lot of exciting, innovative research going on in this area. Next slide, please. And again, please. Okay, can you click it a few times? Oh, yeah, and stop. Thank you. Oh, one more. I think that's it. Just makes it easier rather than going through each one when asking to change the slide. So this is just setting some of the context to think about agrivoltaics for East Africa. Half the population doesn't have access to electricity. So there's already a huge opportunity for these systems to provide electricity. 75% of the population rely on rainfall for their agriculture. But as we all know, climate change is happening. That's not really a debate. It's happening. How it's going to impact things, that's more of the question. And it's forecast for East Africa that temperatures are going to increase, but rainfall is going to become more unpredictable. And when I'm saying this, I want you to be thinking about the issues that we face in the Philippines in the future as well. So rainfall is going to become more unpredictable. And what's that going to mean for the farmers that rely on rainfall for their agriculture? Well, it's forecast that by 2050, under a medium carbon equivalent emissions scenario, major crop yields are going to decrease by 8 to 45%. So that's a substantial food security challenge. And there's also a growing population as well, an increase of 72% over the past 20 years. So there's going to be more people to feed, greater demand for electricity, and a challenging climate facing us as well. So this is setting the context. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we can see how agrivoltaics can help address some of these issues. Next slide, please. This is a good slide to pause on while I have some water. So to address some of these questions and understand the livelihood benefits of agrivoltaics, this is where our Harvesting the Sun Twice project comes in. So this is the system that we have in Kenya. And this is a project involving multiple research organizations, energy developers, agricultural specialists to conduct this research and understand some of the potential benefits. Next slide, please. I've already described the two systems that we've got. So there's the one in Kenya at Latia Agribusiness Solutions, and there's one at Sustainable Agriculture Tanzania. They're doing an absolutely fantastic job at the moment, gathering some incredible data for us to understand the benefits that these systems can offer. I've already mentioned one of them in Kenya is grid tied, the other one's off grid, so that has battery storage, and they both focus on education, training, and capacity building for farmers, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. So here's some photos of the construction of the system to give you a bit of perspective of the scale and the height, and then we can see the completed system here. Next slide, please. It's 3 meters tall to allow for farmers to work underneath, and they have using tools, etc. So there's plenty of space underneath. Now we opted for a 50% panel density. In Europe, they're more looking at 25 to 33% panel densities. Which means that there's much wider gaps because there's less sunlight. But we're actually finding that light availability isn't what's restricting plant growth or crop growth in Kenya. It's issues such as water availability. So the partial shading to reduce water loss is actually could potentially be beneficial. I've mentioned that it's on a north-south axis, and also the rainwater storage tank. Next slide, please. So now to some of the important stuff, the data. So since May the 17th, 2021, we've produced 33 megawatt hours of electricity. This is from Kenya, from Latia Agribusiness Solutions, and that's providing almost 60% of the electricity that the agribusiness is using. So we're reducing their electricity bills by just over $500 a month. Now, for a farm in Kenya, that's a lot of money. And we've saved 18.5 tons of CO2 equivalents, which is that number is given to us from the inverters, so that's not calculated by us. Just a disclaimer. So obviously those savings are substantial for an agribusiness. It means less money on expenses, but also in the current climate with a lot of energy security prices that many countries are facing. those bills are going to be fluctuating. I'm seeing it in my own personal bills in my house, how much I'm having to spend every month on my bills in the UK. So by having a system like this, reduces your susceptibility to those kind of those big shocks and changes in energy prices. Next slide, please. So this graph here, you can see this is the year before the project was implemented, and then you can see the electricity that's now being produced from the agrivoltaic system. So if you, in a way, if you look only at the yellow bars, you can see how the consumption from the grid has massively decreased as the generation met from the solar panels. There was a power surge from the grid, which knocked the inverter offline in this middle period here. So that was another issue that we had. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's the rainwater storage system. So this is the water tank. Next slide, please. And what we're showing here is this is the cumulative consumption of water for irrigation. And we're using almost 50% less water by having the rainwater harvesting and the reduction in evapotranspiration compared to the open field control. So adjacent to our agrivoltaic system, we have an open field control growing the same crops, managed in the same way, but they're having to use a lot more water to irrigate crops because of the evaporation and the water loss. Next slide, please. So now we get on to the food results. So what are we seeing from the crops underneath? Now we're still waiting for a lot of data to come through. So they're still processing the data. But we do have the data from the cabbages, and what we've seen is a 21% increase in the weight of cabbages. And next slide, please. And a 24% increase in the diameter of cabbages. So we're actually underneath the solar panels growing larger, heavier cabbages, which obviously can translate to an increase in the value of the crops. So coming back to that triple win, we're reducing the electricity bills, we're increasing production, and we're reducing the water consumption. And this is what we're seeing from our system in Kenya. Next slide, please. So one of the interesting things to think about, especially if, say, this was being developed on say, a small island in the Philippines, where land sustainability may be more of an issue, is what's the equivalent of the productivity of these systems. So we use a measure called land equivalent ratio. So for this, let's say we have an open field system. These aren't cabbages. This is just representing a farm, a field at Latia Farm. But if we set that as our baseline and we say that's producing, that's 1, that's our baseline, then the productivity of an open field system is 1. And we do that, then do the same for conventional solar. This is Garissa Solar Park in, oh, sorry, next. This is Garissa Solar Park in Kenya. And again, that sets our baseline as 1. With agrivoltaic systems, we've got an increase in yield from the cabbages. We expanded that. So this data does need to be taken with a pinch of salt. We also need to update it as we get more data through. This is an ongoing project. But if we take the cabbage data, expand it to the site over the year. So again, it's just to give an indication. We've increased cabbage yields, but we've lost some land because of the land taken up by the mountain structure. So when you combine that together, you get a productivity for food production as 97. And because the panels are more spaced apart than a traditional solar park, obviously there's this wide gap here, but that's not the case for most of the solar park. There's a slight reduction in electricity generation of around 24% per area of land. But when you combine those two things together, then you've got a land equivalent ratio of 1.73. So the land itself is more productive when you look at both of these outputs compared to just an only growing the crops or only the PV generation. Next slide, please. Now, this is using the same cabbage data. So this is just to give an indication of some of the potential financial aspects. We're going to do a much more detailed financial analysis of these systems once we have all of the data in and once we have all of the financial data from the site in Tanzania as well. But this is just using the first, which is the cabbage data. So an agrivoltaic solar park costs more, as I mentioned. So there's an increase in the development cost, slight reduction in maintenance cost, farm labor and operation. Of course, there's no farm labor on a conventional solar park, but there is on the system in Kenya. The electricity bills are the same. So for this comparison, we just compared a like for like. So a 62 kilowatt peak agrivoltaic system compared to the same size conventional solar park. So the electricity bill saving a year would be the same. But of course, when you add on the sale of the crops underneath the agrivoltaic system, then that increases your return on investment. And actually, so we saw an 8.3% increase from 17.6 to 19.1 for the return on investment, and that reduced the payback time for developing an agrivoltaic park in Kenya. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainable agriculture Tanzania. So it took a little bit longer to get this system set up because of the COVID challenges, but we're now up and running, and I'm really excited. Look at these spinach. Look at it. This is some healthy crops that we've got underneath this system. I mean, when I first mentioned this to people and I said, we're going to put solar panels above crops, they were like, you're mad, you're blocking out the sunlight. This is amazing. This is a really, really, really good site. I love this photo. So they're good scientists. They're also good photographers. Next slide, please. So this is the first data that we've been getting from SAT. So this is on the spinach data. Now, I've gone through this data in detail because these numbers are pretty shocking in a good way. The first harvest was a 67.7% increase in the yield from spinach. The second harvest was a 129% increase in the yield. I mean, that's phenomenal. But if you think about it, it makes sense because the parts of the crop that you harvest for the marketable yield is the leaves. And one of the plant responses to shade is to grow bigger leaves so it can try and capture more sunlight. So if it's a different crop, say sweet pepper, which I'll come on to in a moment, where the crop that you're actually harvesting isn't the leaf, then it's a different situation. But when it's the leaf that you're harvesting, then the partial shade is actually really beneficial. And of course, there's a reduction in water loss. They're using about 15% less water for their irrigation at SAT. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, so I haven't put the data in there yet, but from what we've seen from sweet pepper is a 9% increase in yield from sweet pepper. So it's much lower than the spinach, but it's still an increase in the yield from the sweet pepper as well. And I also have the data for those. And they're doing a fantastic job at SAT with their data collection as well. So they're actually measuring, they're recording the data from every single plant, which is really great. So just to talk a little bit more about some of the other work we're doing, this is, I'm not expecting you to read this here, but this is just to show you the process that we've gone through for a spatial assessment of where agrivoltaics could be developed in East Africa. And again, this could be developed for the Philippines as well. So based on many factors such as solar radiation availability, soil type, precipitation, distance to market, distance to populations, etc., we can then model the suitability of a region for agrivoltaics. So that's what we've done here. And you can actually see in the north of Kenya, the suitability is very low, and we'd probably call that less than 1 rather than 0. But you can see there, and that's because it's an incredibly arid region in North Kenya. The precipitation there is just too low to reach the threshold requirements within our model to grow crops. And the main thing there is either importing food or livestock and pastoralism. So that's the main aspect in Kenya. Whereas when you get to the wetter regions, there's a lot of very healthy agriculture around these systems. This is where SAT is. You can see that there's higher suitability there. And that paper is currently being produced at the moment in preparation. Just before I move on, I just want to talk about some of the other work. We're also doing interviews with local stakeholders and with policymakers and government officials to understand their perspectives of these systems so that we can understand what challenges could be faced in development. So ultimately, we can create a roadmap to support the uptake of agrivoltaic systems. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, so one of the things to then think about to create agrivoltaics in a new location is first you need to review the context. So what's the solar radiation in the Philippines? What's the land, kind of the topography, the soil type, what crops are produced? What's the context of the Philippines agricultural and energy systems, and also water availability and future climate impacts as well. it's then creating partnerships and engaging with the local stakeholders to build the team that will then initiate agrivoltaics developments. And then you move on to the next step, which is developing a pilot system to gather that empirical research, which will support and optimize agrivoltaic systems. So there's a big chunk here, the focus on research. It's basically evidence how the systems work, what works well, and also what doesn't work. You know, there might be crops that don't work well at all. There might be issues with the system, and that all needs to be researched and understood. And then, of course, it's about the results dissemination. So sharing the results that you're finding to inform uptake, engaging with industry, engaging with policymakers. And then from that, you can then create business models that would work for agrivoltaics, and perhaps a decision support tool to help the development. And then, of course, you review everything, go back, and then start to think about new projects with different systems and designs. Next slide, please. And so if you hover down here on the video, it should come up with a little play button. Do we have sound here? Will the video work? Will there be sound in the room? Right. Is it possible to turn the sound up? There should be audio with it. If you could see if it's possible for sound, and then if not, we can just play the video to see what it looks like, but there should be sound with the video.
Local farmer in Kajiado County is learning a new technology called agrivoltaic.
If the white flies are also mingi sana.
The technique involves using solar panels to shed crops, harvest rainwater, and generate clean energy.
This is a new technology which saves on so much, and with the climate change, and especially with the solar production, I think with the solar it's free. We have to maximize to save again on climate change, and basically to save on costs, especially in those arid and semi-arid areas.
The agrivoltaic system has been used successfully in Western countries like the United States and Germany, but this is the first such project in Africa. Year-long research with scientists from the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom, World Agroforestry and Kajiado-based Latia Agropreneurship Institute has yielded positive results for the project dubbed Harvesting the Sun Twice.
We had two plots. We have the control plot that is grown under the normal conditions. And what we were able to know is that after the analysis, we were able to get that the crops that were grown under the panels performed better. That is in terms of the quantity and the quality.
According to World Bank data, more than half of Africa's population did not have access to electricity by 2019. Agrivoltaic technology combines land dedicated to solar panels with land dedicated to agriculture to improve food security and grid connectivity.
Over the last 15 years, over the last 20 to 30 years, all the players that have been in the agriculture ecosystem, we have put the foundations for why agribusiness is viable for the continent. Most of the technologies that we are talking about, we know which technologies have a chance of success on the continent. What really now needs to be done is to connect the dots.
After the successful rollout in Kenya, another trial is being set up in the neighboring Tanzania, the aim being to spread the technology across the continent. But farmers like Anne Watkins say they need help.
Being a capital-intensive project, the government maybe can put up policies in place when it comes to funding, maybe providing cheaper loans to farmers, and maybe organizing farmers into cooperatives, which may end up being a community project as a cooperative.
While adaptation of climate-smart technologies like agrivoltaic offers hope to farmers in the face of a changing climate, the challenge remains in the rollout to farmers in rural Africa who need such technologies the most. Juma, Majanga for VA News, Kajiado, Kenya.
Thank you. Next slide, please, which I think what you're going to be like.
Under Kenya's scorching sun and clear skies, about 60 kilometers south of Nairobi, Anne Watkins, a local
There we go. So now we move on to probably the most important part of the session, which is this discussion of agrivoltaics for the Philippines. So the main crop that's produced here is rice. So here's some studies from Japan of agrivoltaic systems above rice crops. They found in Japan, bearing in mind that Japan's obviously at northern latitude, they found a slight reduction in yield, but the maximum reduction was 20%. So it was ranging to 20%. But of course, there was the sale of there's the production of the electricity as well, and they used a panel density of around 25. They measured different densities between 25 and 40% panel density. But of course, what that's showing you is that you could generate electricity and rice on the same area. And that's one of the important things to bear in mind with this, is that as we've reported in East Africa, which to be honest, we were kind of expecting anyway, because of the issues with water limiting crop production, is yield increases. But actually a slight reduction in yield doesn't mean that it's not work. That's actually still a success, because it shows that you can still produce food on that land. And if you reduce the yield by 50% or something, then that's a big reduction in yield. It's probably, it might not be economically worth it. Thank you. But if it's a slight reduction, say a 10% reduction, 5%, 15% reduction in yield, you can then do the studies to say, okay, is it still economically worth it to produce those crops? Because you're still, don't think of it as a 15% reduction. You can think of it as an 85% production. So that's what they found with the rice systems in Japan. And of course, that could be different in the Philippines as well. But it doesn't, I'm only talking about rice because that's the major crop in the Philippines. There are other crops that could be studied as well. Leafy greens, so leafy greens and vegetables. I mean, those are the ones that we expect would grow well anyway underneath agrivoltaic systems because of the shade tolerance. A personal interest of mine is coffee. When I first started looking into agrivoltaics 5 years ago, coffee was the main crop that I was looking at because it's shade tolerant. I also so that's another one that's produced in the Philippines, and also livestock as well. So I've been primarily talking about crop systems with agrivoltaics, but they can also be used above livestock as well. And in fact, there was a study that was conducted on poultry, on chickens, where they had 3 different treatments. They had an open bare area, an area with trees, and an area with agrivoltaic systems. And the least favored area for the chickens to spend time was the open area. And then they would generally spend their time evenly underneath the shade of the trees and underneath the shade of the solar panels. So also poultry could be can work with agrivoltaic systems. And then there's all sorts of things to think about, such as, and this is something that actually Ray was discussing with me, was are there opportunities for the solar panels to actually protect crops from, say, damage from typhoons? I mean, this is uncharted territory with agrivoltaics research, which for me is very exciting. The systems need to be designed to be resilient to high wind speeds, but also the solar panels could create a buffer for the turbulence of the air, which could reduce the damage of crops compared to an open field system to typhoons. I don't know if that's the case, but that's something that we could explore. So there's that aspect as well. So next slide, please, which is my final slide. So this is now the most exciting part, where we have the discussion of agrivoltaics for the Philippines. What do we need to think about? What could the systems look like? What crops could work? Where could it work? There are many different questions. So I just want to say a huge thank you for listening to the talk. Salamat, I can say it again. Thank you very much. It's been an honor to present our work here and also to discuss this, and I look forward to the conversation we're about to have. And I'd like to answer any questions that anybody has from the audience, and if there are any questions online as well, so we can have a Q&A session before then having an open discussion about agrivoltaics for the Philippines. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again, Professor Richard Randle-Boggis from the University of Sheffield, United Kingdom. Thank you very much for that comprehensive and very interesting topic on agrivoltaic systems. Dr. Richard, this time I would have to ask you, Professor, to stay at the stage for our open forum. All right, I'd like to call in this time Dr. Elmar Villota to facilitate our open forum. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Parsons.
Thank you.
Very complete, very motivating presentations from Dr. Randy, of course. I want to take it back a little bit and look at the context of this SDGs. Since yesterday's sessions, we've been talking about SDGs, food, hunger, solving an energy crisis, of course. And agrivoltaic, as I saw from this presentation, is it has a really high potential in solving the food energy, and then you added the water context to it, and it's really important that we look into that. And SDGs really is trying to move forward with the development with the least impact or footprint in the environment. That's why I saw the impact of this technology to be a very good potential. So now I just want to tell you some profile of our audience this afternoon. So our audience are actually mostly students of agricultural engineering from the College of Engineering, also faculty of the college are all here. So you've discussed how multidisciplinary and how technology is complex, that we need a lot of expertise from, of course, agriculture engineering, structural engineering. So we felt that this is the best audience for you. So I hope, and I'm expecting a lot of questions from this audience here. So yes, let's formally start the Q&A for the audience. So can somebody throw in the first question to Dr. Richard, sorry. It was Randall, all right? Any question? How about our friends from Zoom? Do we have any question from Zoom? If we don't have any question at this point, maybe I can throw in the first one. Yeah. Well, the structure. So I think one of the topics, or one of the important aspect that you haven't walked us through is, so this is an elevated solar farms, right? In terms of the material that you have to add into compared to a conventional solar farm, how much is it? How much longer do I need my structural? How much wider? How much in cost, perhaps, or in terms of the carbon footprint of the overall system? Can you walk us through with that?
Sure, and that's a very important question as well. So that will depend on the agricultural activities that are being conducted. So if you need mechanized agriculture, then you would need the systems to be higher than if it's manual labor. And in terms of how you space them apart, that will depend on the solar radiation in the area and the shade tolerance of the crops that are produced underneath. So if there's high solar radiation and you're growing shade tolerant crops, then you can have a greater panel density, so you get more electricity generation from the unit area of land, while also potentially having the benefits for the crops, like what we've seen with our project in East Africa. Whereas if you're growing crops which need a bit more sunlight and there's not so much sunlight available, then you may need to space the panels further apart. So the system of the design, it's not an out-the-box system, which is, one agrivoltaic system fits all. It needs to be designed for the local context. And this is one of the reasons why it's important that a pilot study is conducted in the Philippines, because if, for example, DA Bar won't develop an agrivoltaic system based on research in Germany. It's a completely different context. So they would need to develop the system based on research that's conducted in the Philippines with the Philippine context, with Philippine crops. So that's one of the important things, is developing the system based on the local context, not just on a country level, but also really the local agribusiness and the regional level of the environmental conditions in that location, and again, like the soil type as well. So it's an important question, but the answer is variable, essentially.
All right. So since we don't have, essentially we don't have any trials yet in the Philippines, right? You've enumerated several crops that might be possible in using this. Like in agriculture engineering, we're pushing hard on the mechanization, right? So that's one of the weak sides, I feel like, because of the structures that we have to build. And of course, we are still pushing with a lot of mechanization for increased productivity of the land. But I like how the agrivoltaics offer new perspective in terms of land productivity, because instead of pushing hard on the food, we can use it for energy production. Right now, in terms of oh wait, do we have any questions? May nakaisip na ba na questions so far? Oh, we have questions from Zoom. I don't want to be too selfish here, so let's try to check our Zoom. All right. So there you go. So first question from Philip Paul Paras. So his question is, can the structure withstand harsh typhoons in the Philippines? So I feel like this is a researchable area you said earlier. So you could please address that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an incredibly important question, which is one that needs to be addressed. That's an engineering challenge. And so once the system is designed in terms of, so you've got your location selected, you know which crops you're going to grow, and you know the panel density, you then need to work with structural engineers to say, okay, what's the force, what's the load that the system needs to bear when certain typhoon wind speeds are placed upon this design of the flat structures of the solar panels, and also the angle of the solar panels as well. So you would then need to understand the load bearing requirements. So it can be overcome, but that's an engineering question that once you know the design of your system, you then work with structural engineers to say, okay, build this but stronger.
Exactly. So there you go. That's the answer. It really depends on the motivation and structural elements of it. Next one would be from our friend from Phil Rice. I think I know this guy, si Kuya Dindo. So what is the cost of the technology per hectare? Straightforward question.
Yeah, excellent. And again, another very important question. So per hectare, it varies because you have different density. People often ask per hectare, probably coming from an agricultural perspective, but the main issue you look at, the main area you will look at it is the cost per installed electricity capacity. So you're looking at it from a solar development. So how much does it cost? So in that sense, the project costs in East Africa, it costs around $1,200 per kilowatt. So for every kilowatt peak of capacity, then that would cost about $1,200. Those costs have been decreasing with solar panel costs decreasing. Obviously, things are a little bit rocky at the moment with the panel, with the price. But yeah, that's the way that we measure the price of agrivoltaic systems, is the installation cost per kilowatt peak.
And of course, we need to consider the whole production cycle of as well in terms of your crop production, because that would makes your economic study more sensible.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also just to mention that, so the size of our system in Kenya is 0.08 hectares. So it's a 40 by 20 meter plot. But again, saying the price per hectare isn't as useful, because you might not need a whole hectare. Obviously, you can portion the cost that you're looking at. But if you change the panel density, then the cost is going to massively change. If you change from a 25% panel density to a 50% panel density, that's a massive change in your price per hectare.
All right. While we're at it, is there such thing as smallest area that we could employ agrivoltaic? Is there such thing, or of course it depends again a lot about the economics, but in your study, in your experience, what is the smallest size that we can put up?
So some studies in agrivoltaics are looking at, like, say, 10 kilowatts. So again, if we think of the image that we've got in Kenya, so if you picture that solar park, that's a 62 kilowatt peak system. So you could have, say, fifth of that, but you still need to have enough of an area that it's worth developing as an agrivoltaic system, rather than, say, just having some solar panels on an area of ground. But again, it depends on the local context and the local needs. Technically, you could just have one solar panel raised above some crops. So from a technical perspective, the range is from a few hundred kilowatts through to large megawatt scale systems. The question is what's economically viable, and also what makes sense to put your effort into.
So that's where the research should be looked into, like especially here in the Philippines when starting these systems, right?
Yeah, exactly. Understanding the economics of different system designs, different mounting structures, and then the value of the crops underneath. That can then inform your economic model to then understand what scales it's worth implementing at.
And that's why it involves a lot of disciplines. You need a lot of engineering, with a lot of crop science and physics, perhaps because of this shading, the geometry of this, the location of the sun, the location of your farm. Any more questions, sir? Do you have a question?
Dr. Elmer, we have received here a couple of questions from our Facebook Live participants. We have here Dr. Richard, a question from Mencho Sevilla from San Jose City, Nueva Ecija. Since there is a significant reduction in sunlight exposure of plants, what is the effect of such in prevalence of insect infestation?
That's a very good question. And that's something that we need to do more research on that. At the moment, we only have observational data from the farmers saying whether there's been a disease or pests on the crop. Finding is generally, if there is an outbreak of a disease or pest, it's affecting both the agrivoltaic system and the control plot as well. So it's not the panels affecting it so much. It's just that's what's happening in the local area. But that's a very important question because that's something that needs to be researched, particularly. So obviously the question was about insects, but also about fungal diseases as well, because potentially you would change the humidity of the system. You're reducing evaporative water loss, but you're also creating a bit of a protective layer. Obviously, you've got the partial shading, but the humidity could increase. So that could have implications for fungal disease. We've not seen that yet, but that's something that needs to be further researched.
All right, thank you very much for the response, Dr. Richard. Another question here, Dr. Emma, this is something to do with the first question a while back. Since the Philippines is frequently by typhoons, it will be a challenge to dismantle the panel arrays. Do you have any special clamps to address the scenario?
No, we've not developed agrivoltaic systems for typhoons yet. That's why it's such an exciting area, because it's a new challenge, and the systems do need to be designed. And in fact, that's I'm going to flip that around. That's a question that I have. What would be required for an agrivoltaic system in the Philippines? Because my approach, I was thinking, was that you would make the systems incredibly robust to those wind speeds. But is it actually that you would be expecting that if a typhoon is forecast, you would try and take the panels down? So that's something I'll ask. But another question that I've also wondered is, could you change the angle of the panels so you could have a mechanical system or a digital system where if a certain speed is picked up, their panels could then angle so that they're facing into the wind, essentially, as in like the leading edge going into the wind, so that you reduce the wind load on the solar panels. So if the panels are like this and you've got a strong wind force coming this way, you could angle them like that. Could that be one solution as well? But again, this is where we get to the open discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richard. So
We have more questions on Zoom, I think.
Here, Dr. Elmer?
Yeah, I think we have more chats coming from Zoom. Where are we? Solar tracking technology. Is there a solar tracking for PV system suitable in the Philippines? I think this is a question. Can you answer this? Maybe now.
I can't answer this at the moment.
I'm sorry, we'll look it up in Google or it's totally on the solar panel side. So
it's on the solar panel side, not the economic side, on the supply chain side.
Let's go to the next from Arlena from REST-D. I don't know which institution this she belongs to, but in Philippines, off-season producing vegetables is one technology being implemented to ensure food security. Maybe good to add. Oh, maybe this is not a question. Sorry. Maybe good to add also Philippine setting using rain shelters. I don't see any question with that.
But if that comment, I'm not sure if it's alluding to protection of the rainfall on the crops. But just to mention one thing that a study in the Netherlands has found is that the solar panels can reduce hail damage on soft fruits. So on raspberries, hail can often wipe out the harvest of the raspberries, and so the solar panels can protect the crops from that. I'm not sure how much it hails in the Philippines, but heavy rainfall or again typhoons could damage crops, so it could be that the systems provide a bit of protection.
There's no hail in the Philippines. The only hail I know in the Philippines is Dr. Parsons' hail. It's just heavy rains and heavy winds, basically. So there's a follow-up question from Dindo from PhilRice. What is the estimated size of the area that could be provided by the technology? It's actually the same question I had earlier. I'm thinking that the technology will be useful in rain-fed rice areas. So it's basically no irrigation, just rain-fed areas. So
Yeah, that just to comment on that, this question comes up a lot, and it's similar to your question at the start, is about the scale. And again, it's not a one size fits all, and it's not that there's only one scale. It can be developed on a very small scale for a small, say, smallholder farmer. It can also be developed for a large agribusiness. So it could be a few kilowatts, or 0.05 hectares, or it could be hectare scale, several megawatt scale, huge fields covered in solar panels. All of these different scales have been demonstrated in agrivoltaic systems. There are megawatt scale systems of agrivoltaics. So once the technology is proven, it could get to that size as well.
Right. We have one more question here. Sir, what are the specific equipment or structures needed for this technology? If the Philippines is to pursue the technology, maybe a feasibility first is to be done. Of course, Philippines on average sun hours. So perhaps Clifford here is right to ask, what are the critical technologies, critical equipment that we need to have with this kind of system?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you very much for that. So to understand these systems and to research them, yes, we need obviously different technologies to understand the systems. If you can understand how it's performing and the environment that it's creating, you can then use that to inform future development and to optimize the systems. So a typical research project, once the system is installed, you would conduct many of the plant science experiments. So measuring like the rate of growth, different aspects of the morphology and the physiology of the crops. So that field aspect. Then to measure the environmental components, you would measure things such as the PAR, photosynthetic active radiation, with a PAR sensor, measure the air temperature, measure the soil temperature, soil moisture content, relative humidity, and you can measure all of these environmental conditions, which can then help inform your understanding of the environment that's created under the solar panels, which you can then say, in fact, then this will then work with this crop type. It won't work with this crop type.
Thank you. Now, before we continue from Zoom questions, meron na ba nakaisip ng tanong sa mga live audience natin? Do you have any questions from the live audience? Oh yeah, please, yeah. This is our master student, Miss Carla. Go ahead.
What is the, if there is any difference or advantages compared to solar-powered greenhouses?
So I think they would be developed in different contexts, but both would be applicable. So you could develop agrivoltaics for open field systems if that's what suits the agricultural production, but also you can implement solar panels into the greenhouses as well. So PV greenhouses have also been developed. So if you're, say, growing crops that you would grow in a greenhouse, ornamental flowers, if you would grow those in a greenhouse, then that's when you could have agrivoltaic systems as part of a PV greenhouse. If it's something you would traditionally grow as an open field system, that's when you would go for the open field agrivoltaics. Again, it's not one or the other, or one's better and one's worse. It's just different designs for different contexts. But both of them have been developed, both have been tested, so that also works. So if you're thinking of a certain application of greenhouses in the Philippines, then PV greenhouses is another option.
Yeah. So whichever works for you is basically, Carla. Yeah. All right. More questions from the live audience. Dr. Vitaliano Malamog from our department.
This is not actually a question, but an observation. The last slide you showed to us regarding the factors that would affect the acceptance of the agrivoltaic in the Philippines, that part which is political support. You didn't say government support, no, which is true. Because I have been teaching project planning and management, and I have also got involved in so many projects. And then when government administration or government officials were changed, and then you shift to different directions.
Thank you
Okay.
so much. Ma'am. That's why we need to stick it to the technical side.
Yeah, and
That's a question that cannot be
yeah,
answered.
I think on that, the first thing is to essentially do what you can to prove the technology, prove the system. It's not, it's an issue we face in the UK as well. Yeah, I won't get started on the UK government. We're live on Facebook. Enough said. Hopefully, I'll have a job when I get back.
All right. Are you done? Yeah. Any more questions from our live audience?
We still have one here, a text message, Dr. Elmer. The question is, I understand that the potentials of agrivoltaic as addressing multiple development goals, such as energy insecurity, food insecurity, and climate change. What by far are the challenges in this particular agrivoltaic systems that you have experienced in the context of Tanzania?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, so a lot of the challenge. Well, first, actually, COVID. I mean, that wasn't what we were expecting, and hopefully that won't be a challenge again. But that was a big issue. Thinking more broadly from our research, actually, we've not had many challenges with Tanzania because we've got an absolutely fantastic partner there who's running the project very well and delivering good data. But the main issue that we would see is the financial aspect, because these systems are expensive. So how's it going to be funded? Where's the money going to come from? What's the access to finance or access to credit? There's the high upfront cost, and then if it's based on a loan, then there's obviously the cost of finance. There's the interest rates that go with that. So the financial aspect is one of the challenges. There is also a learning curve that we've gone through, that I've gone through with this as well. Issues such as the farmers connected a DC fridge and it blew the inverter. Because the system has the inverter which converts to AC. They plugged in a DC fridge because they didn't know about that, and plugging that in actually blew the inverter. Because it was still in the installation process, the solar developer, who also did a fantastic job of this, Chloride Exide Limited, with a solar developer we've worked with, a local developer in East Africa, and they replaced the inverter. They then also installed the fuse box and the switchboard to stop it happening again. But that was a learning curve, I think, for everybody. So there are some of those issues as well, those technical challenges, which I would say should be supported from the energy developer. So I would say that that all of these safety systems need to be put in place, both for a human safety from the electricity, but also from protecting the system from different surges and loads. We've had one issue at each site, basically. A grid surge from in Kenya blew the inverter, and then plugging in a fridge blew the inverter in Tanzania.
So it's more on the technology transfer and the learning curve.
Yeah, exactly. It's about that knowledge sharing as well.
So before I go back to the Zoom questions, I would like to prioritize our live audience, because they took time to come here and listen. And come on, guys, please ask some questions. Our Vice President himself, sir.
Oh, here we go.
We are spending about 3 million pesos in electricity per month. And we are also producing a lot of farm products, both rice and vegetables. I think CLSU will be a good candidate as a research site for agrivoltaics technology. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we go back to our Zoom questions. So we have one here. Was there any trial conducted on upland or slope terrain setting?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm wondering, with the slope terrain, are you thinking of, say, like different rice terraces, or is it just, or actually like having a slope? Again, I would say that if it's land that is used for agriculture and it's farmland, then the only challenge, which I would say could easily be overcome, would be the engineering challenge. Just how do you implement, how do you install the system on slope land? There will be a certain slope, which is a cutoff, and that's actually what we've got in our model. We're currently working on a paper to introduce the potential for agrivoltaics in the UK, and we have a cutoff of 11% of a slope, because that's what solar developers use. it's an engineering challenge. The
Yeah,
way that I see these things is often you just work with the engineers to overcome the challenge.
another structural problem. Huh?
Yeah.
All right. So, yes, sir. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, we need your response from that
No,
proposal from our
absolutely.
vice president. Yeah.
So what I would say, even before coming here, is that I believe there is huge potential for agrivoltaics in the Philippines. Ray was telling me that it's only 3% of the energy mix from the Philippines is renewables, and there needs to be a big push for renewables, both from an environmental perspective, but also from an energy security perspective. That's generation of electricity. So there's going to be a big push for renewables. My partner's actually here in the Philippines at the moment presenting at a conference on offshore wind. So between the two of us, we've got the wind and the solar
Nice.
addressed. And so I think there is the potential from the energy aspect, and then also from the farming system as well, from a land sustainability. So I think that this is the reason why I'm here, is because I see that there's potential for agrivoltaics in the Philippines. And in terms of CLSU hosting the site, I think that would make sense. The main issue, it comes down to the funding and what would the project look like? What would the structure of the project look like? Not the physical structure of the agrivoltaic system, but the structure of the projects, and then also the funding to implement it. So,
Sir, we have 645 hectares of land to offer, and we have the ABAR to support the fund.
yeah. Well,
Thank you.
what I would say to that is let's get going. I mean,
Of course. And we hope we have all the expertise. We have the agricultural engineers, we have the crop scientists, we have entomologists like insects.
Excellent,
Question earlier,
excellent.
yeah. Structural engineering, of course, we have civil engineering as well. We have the IT. I think we have complete pool of experts you need for this particular
Yeah.
technology. Yeah.
I know, we're laughing and enjoying it, but I really think that it could happen. I think we now just need to make it happen. But there's a reason why I'm here talking about this, is because I see the potential here. I can see that there's the expertise here to make it happen. Now we just need to do it. And I think in all seriousness, it can happen. We just need to start taking the next steps. So this is the first step, is to introduce the concept. It's a novel idea. It's only been discussed, mainly for the past few years. And, now let's introduce it to the Philippines.
Yeah, we hope to continue the conversation how to go about with these proposals. And
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
we owe it to the environment, really. So we need to really push forward about it. Yeah. And now I think any more questions from our live audience? Go ahead, sir.
Afternoon po. So I observe po, meron pong water tank dun sa may, there is a water tank in previous videos. And my question is there a water management system in the tank? Water level is significant in yields in terms of harvesting rice in the Philippines. So rice is one of the main crop in the Philippines.
So that's an interesting question. We don't have any technology within the tank for water management. It's a very, I suppose in a way, rudimentary system of just it's guttering, which channels the water to the storage tank, and then it's a manual tap. So when the farmer wants to irrigate, they either use their borehole or their reservoir, which is what they use traditionally for irrigation, or they use the tank that's been collected from the rainwater and the panel cleaning water. So it's very much a manual system, as that when the tank's got water in it, they can use that tap rather than the tap for the irrigation. So it's a very simple system that we have in East Africa. But of course, like I keep saying, it's not an out-of-the-box system. So these systems could be designed to be more technologically advanced with, say, automated irrigation systems that can measure where the water, if the water tank's full, then they can use the irrigation from there. So it could be that new technologies are developed for water management.
All right. Do we have time? Meron pa tayo isa? Can we have questions there?
We could accommodate one more question.
One more question.
Dr. Elmer from the audience,
From the audience,
please.
please.
Come on. I think we have one question here from our participant.
Dr. Wendy Mateo from the department.
Okay, good afternoon. One of the interesting parameter you have mentioned earlier is the LER. So, which you said depend on the design, spacing of the panels, and the panel density. My question is there a minimum LER for the system to be acceptable or efficient? And based on your design, did you establish a minimum land area for a good LER?
So I'd say there isn't a a minimum that's a universal level. I think it would depend on who is the user of the agrivoltaic system and what do they set as their threshold. So if, for example, say it's a farmer that says these are the yield tolerances these are the yield levels that I would tolerate for my crop production, and then the energy aspect is more complicated because it depends on whether it's an energy developer who manages the system and sells the electricity, and then they would be saying, okay, what's our electricity generation threshold that we would accept to say like a lower level of the electricity generation. But if it's managed by the agribusiness, then they wouldn't have so much of an issue for that because they're obviously just using as much electricity as they can from the system. And if it's not enough, then if it's grid tied, they still have the electricity from the grid. So I would say that there isn't a minimum universal level. It depends on what the system wants. And if there are multiple parties involved, then that's where it gets a little bit more complicated because you have to balance what the farmer wants with what the energy developer wants. But if it's managed by one system, it's a little bit easier.
All right, thank you. So I guess that concludes our open forum. I'm sorry from our friends from Zoom. I will try to have email of Dr. If we could your contact Dr. Richard so they can address the rest of the questions directly to you, perhaps. Of course, we also would like to thank Sir Ray and Sir June for being with us this afternoon, and of course Dr. Randy for. Richard, sorry, Dr. Richard, for her. You know, when I look at the numbers on your presentations, they really are too good to be true.
Yeah.
And we thank you for coming over to really prove that it is too good and it is in fact true.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you coming by. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Elmo Viriota, for moderating our open forum. Ladies and gentlemen, another big round of applause to Professor Dr. Richard Randle-Boggis from the University of Sheffield, United Kingdom, on presenting agrivoltaics. Well, it was really interesting and meaningful afternoon. Well, Sir President, we might want to consider signing the memorandum of agreement already. right after this, a meaningful event. Well, kidding aside, ladies and gentlemen, that was a really informative, comprehensive lecture on agrivoltaics and potentials of energy and agriculture and multiple development and sustainable goals, development goals. Well, further much ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to walk you through again in our next part of our program, which is, of course, we will be awarding our plaque of appreciation to our presenter. I would like to request the presence of our university president, Dr. Edgar Urden, together with our VPs here on stage, and to Dr. Richard Randle in front, to may I request Dr. Renato G. Reyes also to join us here on stage for the awarding of plaque of appreciation to our presenter. There you go. As I read the citation, ladies and gentlemen, a celebration of high impact CLSU, the certificate of appreciation is presented to Dr. Richard J. Randle-Boggis in imparting his knowledge, valuable insights, experiences, and expertise as professorial lecturer in Research, Innovation, and Development Festival, a celebration of high impact CLSU held on October 11 to 14, 2022 at Central Luzon State University Science City of Muñoz, Nueva Ecija. Given this 11th day of October 2022, signed Dr. Edgar A. Urden, University President. Sir? We would like to request a photo opportunity this time, as much as we would like to also have a photo or selfie with our audience later, I know. Thank you very much. Sir, one more time here, together with our visitors and sirs here. There you go. All right. Okay. So, at this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call in for the next part of our program for the closing remarks, I'd like to call in the director of the University Research Center. Please help me welcome in Dr. Maria Excelsis Emorden. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, Parsons. Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good afternoon. This afternoon is indeed a very special one and a very informative one. We learned a lot from our guest lecturer, Dr. Richard J. Randle-Boggis. Very seldom we have lecturers, professorial lecturers here at CLSU, especially during the last 3 years. And thanks God you are here. And thanks God everyone is here. Of course, we would like to thank you. A million thanks, Dr. Boggis and party, for the technology that you have shared to us. And of course, to the ABAR for organizing or coordinating this activity. And this technology is really very fitting to CLSU because we would like to be a world-class research university. CLSU aimed to be or to have a smarter agriculture, but of greater impact to the community that we target to serve. This technology is very fitting and could provide environmental and economic benefits to the community on the matter of energy, food, water, land, and socioeconomics. Faculty members, researchers, and students, I know we have learned a lot. Dr. Boggis and his lecture is indeed very engaging. Let this learning be one of our frameworks in our future R&D activities. And let this be the beginning of our future collaboration. We would like to call on the ABAR for your continued support to our R&D program here at CLSU. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause to Dr. Richard. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much once again to Dr. Maria Excelsis Emorden for the closing remarks. Well, once again, this professorial lecture is brought to you by the Central Luzon State University and the DA Bar. And once again, maraming salamat po sa ating mga audience in person, and of course, our participants via the Zoom platform. Maraming salamat po. This will not be the last one, the last professorial lecture that we're going to have. More of Dr. Boggis soon. All right. Well, this has been your host. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat, and we will see you until tomorrow. We still have our activities for tomorrow and the rest of the week. Maraming salamat po, and God bless us all. This is Parsons Hale. Mabuhay po ang lahat. Thank you, and God bless you all.